June 4, 1942, 08:47 hours, USS Yorktown, Midway Atoll, Seaman First Class. Raymond Ray Kowalski crouched behind the 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft gun on the starboard side, his white cook's apron still tied around his waist, soaked through with sweat and seawater. The Japanese Zero fighters were coming in low, 37 of them according to the spotter's frantic count, their engines screaming like angry hornets at 280 knots. Ray's hands were shaking, but not from fear. The problem was the gun itself. Every third round was jamming. The spent casings weren't ejecting clean, men were dying because of it. Before we continue with Ray Kowalski's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to the USS Yorktown, June 4th, 1942, where Ray Kowalski was about to break every regulation in the Navy's gunnery manual. Ray Kowalski wasn't supposed to be at that gun. 23 years old, 5'7", born and raised in Hamtramck, Michigan, a Polish neighborhood where his father ran a small restaurant on Joseph Campo Avenue. Ray had joined the Navy in March 1941, 9 months before Pearl Harbor, because the recruiting officer promised him he could work in the galley. "You cook pierogies. You can cook for sailors," the man had said. Ray had never fired a gun in his life before boot camp, but on carriers, everyone had a battle station. When General Quarters sounded, cooks became gunners, and Ray had been assigned to Gun Mount 3 starboard side, 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft battery. The Oerlikon was supposed to be reliable, a Swiss-designed weapon that fired 450 rounds per minute, effective range 1,000 yards. It was the carrier's last line of defense against attacking aircraft. The problem was the heat. In the tropical humidity of the Pacific, combined with the rapid firing cycles, the Oerlikon's ejection port would expand just enough, maybe 1/4 of a millimeter, that spent brass casings wouldn't clear properly. They'd catch on the edge, jam the mechanism, and the gun would stop. Dead. You'd have to manually clear it, which took anywhere from 8 to 15 seconds. 8 to 15 seconds was a lifetime when a Zero was diving at you at 300 miles per hour. Between December 1941 and May 1942, across the Pacific Fleet, gunners had logged 4 847 confirmed jamming incidents on the 20mm Oerlikon. The Navy's Bureau of Ordnance knew about it. They'd issued 3 technical bulletins. None of them worked. The official solution was maintain weapon temperature below operational threshold, which was impossible during sustained combat. 41 sailors had died at their guns, trying to clear jams while under attack. Ray's loader was a kid named Thomas Chen from Sacramento, California. 20 years old, parents owned a produce market on Franklin Boulevard. Tommy talked constantly about going home, about expanding the market into a full grocery store. "Kowalski and Chen's," he'd joke. "You cook Polish? I'll stock Chinese vegetables. We'll make a fortune." They'd shaken hands on it the night before the battle, sitting on the deck under the stars, smoking lucky strikes that Tommy had won in a poker game. The morning of June 4th, during the first wave of Japanese attacks, Tommy had been loading for Gun Mount 5 portside. A Zero had strafed the deck at 08:23 hours. Tommy had been hit twice, once in the chest, once in the throat. He'd bled out in 47 seconds, according to the corpsman's report. Ray had heard about it over the comm system while he was still in the galley, preparing what was supposed to be lunch. Ray never made it back to the galley that day. Now he was at Gun Mount 3 and it was jamming. Every third round, fire, fire, jam, clear. Fire, fire, jam, clear. The Zero fighters were getting through. Ray watched one strafe the flight deck, saw the tracer rounds walk across the wooden planking like deadly footprints. Another Zero put 2 bombs into the carrier's side. The whole ship shuddered. Black smoke poured from somewhere below. The PA system was screaming coordinates, but Ray could barely hear it over the engine noise. and the anti-aircraft fire from other positions. Gun Mount 4, 30 feet to his left, had gone silent, jammed. The gunner was frantically working the charging handle, his face twisted in panic. Gun Mount 7, aft, was firing in short bursts. Jam. Clear. Fire. Jam. The pattern was everywhere. Across the fleet, it was the same story. The Navy's primary anti-aircraft weapon was failing exactly when it was needed most. Ray's mind went somewhere else, not to the battle, not to Tommy bleeding out on the other side of the ship. His mind went to Hamtramck, to his father's restaurant, to a specific problem they'd had with the industrial mixer. A big Hobart model that would seize up when the dough got too thick, when the motor overheated. The safety clutch would engage and lock everything down. His father's solution had been simple, embarrassingly simple. He'd taken a long metal spoon, a serving spoon with a thin handle, and wedged it into the clutch mechanism at a precise angle. It acted like a spring, just enough to keep the clutch from fully engaging, but not enough to damage the motor. The mixer would keep running. They'd used that spoon-modified mixer for 6 years. Ray looked at the Oerlikon's ejection port, at the spent casings catching on the edge, at the slight thermal expansion that was causing the whole problem. What if you could keep the ejection port from expanding? That night, June 4th, after the battle, after they'd lost 35 men and the Yorktown was listing 7 degrees to port, Ray went to the galley. The ship was still at general quarters, but the immediate danger had passed. The Japanese had withdrawn. The cooks were trying to feed 900 exhausted, traumatized men. Ray found what he was looking for in the utility drawer, a standard Navy-issue serving spoon. Stainless steel, 12 inches long with a thin handle that was slightly curved. He took a hacksaw from the damage control locker. He cut the spoon's bowl off, leaving just the handle. Then he took a file and carefully ground one end into a wedge shape, flat on one side, angled on the other. The whole process took him 43 minutes. His hands were shaking the entire time. What he'd made was essentially a heat sink, and a spring in one. The idea was to wedge the spoon handle into the gap between the ejection port housing and the receiver body. The metal would absorb some of the heat, conduct it away from the critical expansion point, and the spring tension from the wedged handle would keep constant pressure on the ejection port, preventing it from expanding outward. It was completely against regulations. The Navy's technical manual for the Oerlikon was 247 pages long. Nowhere in those pages did it say you could modify the weapon with kitchen utensils. In fact, page 89 specifically stated, "No field modifications to receiver assembly permitted under any circumstances." If Ray installed this and an officer saw it, he'd be looking at court-martial. Article 108 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, damage to military property. Possible sentence, 5 years hard labor. But Tommy was dead. 41 other sailors were dead, and the Zeros would be back. Ray waited until 300 hours during the graveyard watch. The deck was quiet except for the damage control parties working below. He went to Gun Mount 3 with the modified spoon handle in his pocket, wrapped in a galley towel. The gun was still warm from the day's fighting. Ray could smell the burned powder residue, the hot metal, the salt spray that had been blown across the deck during the attack. His hands were sweating inside his work gloves. He disassembled the receiver assembly far enough to access the ejection port housing. The spoon handle slid in perfectly. He'd measured it right. He wedged it in at a 17-degree angle, using the spring tension to hold it in place. Then he reassembled everything, working by feel as much as sight, using a red lens flashlight so he wouldn't ruin his night vision. The whole installation took 9 minutes. When he was done, the spoon handle was invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. It was hidden in the shadow of the receiver housing, just a thin piece of metal that looked like it might have been part of the original design. Ray sat there for a moment, his heart hammering. He'd just violated direct orders. He'd modified a weapons system during wartime. If it failed, if the gun exploded or malfunctioned because of what he'd done, he'd be responsible for every death that resulted. He couldn't test it, couldn't fire the gun, not without alerting the entire ship. He'd have to wait until the next attack. Until the next time the Zeros came. The next attack came at 14:05 hours on June 5th. 18 Japanese aircraft, 14 Zeros, 4 Aichi D-3A dive bombers. They came in from the northwest, low and fast, using the sun glare to mask their approach until they were at 4 Wizard yards. Ray was at gun mount 3 again. Same position, same white apron, now stained with oil and gunpowder residue. His mouth was dry, his hands found the grips automatically. The order came over the PA. "All batteries, commence firing." Ray squeezed the trigger. The Oerlikon roared to life. The familiar thunder of 450 rounds per minute, the brass casings flying out in a golden arc, catching the afternoon sunlight. Fire, 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 fire. No jam. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. No jam. Ray's eyes went wide. The spent casings were ejecting clean, every single one, arcing over the side of the ship in a perfect stream. The spoon handle was working. The ejection port wasn't expanding. The heat was being conducted away just enough to maintain the critical tolerances. He tracked a Zero coming in at 800 yards, firing in controlled bursts like the manual taught. The tracers reached out, found the aircraft's engine cowling. The Zero started trailing smoke, broke off its attack run, spiraled down into the ocean 600 yards off the starboard side. Ray kept firing. Another Zero, this one closer, 400 yards. He led it perfectly, walked the rounds up the fuselage, the canopy shattered. The Zero tumbled, out of control, splashed into the water 200 yards from the carrier. The gun wasn't jamming, not once, not even after a full minute of continuous fire. The gunner at Mount 4 was screaming. His gun had jammed again. He was trying to clear it, fumbling with the charging handle, while a Zero lined up for a strafing run on his position. Ray swung his gun around, not supposed to do that, each mount had its sector of fire, and caught the Zero at 300 yards. 3-second burst, the Zero's left wing separated from the fuselage. The aircraft cartwheeled into the ocean. Behind him, the gun captain was yelling something. Ray couldn't hear it, couldn't hear anything except the roar of his own weapon and the scream of aircraft engines. The attack lasted 30 minutes. Ray fired 247 rounds without a single malfunction. In that 30-minute period, gun mount 3, Ray's position, was credited with 7 confirmed kills. 7 Japanese aircraft. Other gunners nearby saw his tracer fire, saw the impossible stream of rounds without interruption, saw aircraft after aircraft fall from the sky. When the all-clear sounded, when the last Japanese aircraft had withdrawn or been shot down, Ray's hands were locked on the grips. His loader, a replacement, a kid from Iowa whose name Ray never learned, had to physically pull him away from the gun. Lieutenant Commander James Hartley, the air defense officer, came to gun mount 3 personally. He'd been watching from the island superstructure. He'd seen what happened. "Kowalski," he said, "your gun didn't jam, not once." Ray's throat was so dry he could barely speak. "No, sir. Every other Oerlikon on this ship jammed at least twice. Yours didn't. Why?" This was it. Court-martial or commendation. Ray had no idea which. "I modified it, sir." Hartley's face went rigid. "You what?" "I installed a heat dissipation device in the ejection port housing. It prevents thermal expansion." "Show me." Ray showed him the spoon handle, explained how it worked, explained the spring tension, the heat conduction, the precise angle needed to maintain pressure without interfering with the mechanism. Hartley stared at the modified gun for a long time. Then he looked at Ray. "Did you get permission from the gunnery officer?" "No, sir." "Did you consult the technical manual?" "Sir, the manual says—" "I know what the manual says, Seaman." Hartley's face was unreadable. "The manual says you just earned yourself a court-martial." Ray's stomach dropped. Then Hartley smiled, just slightly. "The manual also says I'm supposed to maintain maximum combat effectiveness of all weapon systems, and your gun just shot down 7 aircraft while every other mount was jamming. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to modify every 20mm Oerlikon on this ship, tonight, and you're not going to tell anyone I ordered you to do it. Understood?" "Sir, That's an order, Kowalski. Modify the guns. And if anyone asks, you're doing it on your own initiative. Because if the Bureau of Ordnance finds out I authorize field modifications, I'll be commanding a garbage scow in the Aleutians." Ray spent that night and the next day modifying 18 Oerlikon guns on the Yorktown. He wasn't alone. Other gunners saw what he was doing, asked questions, helped where they could. He made spoon handles out of every piece of spare stainless steel he could find in the galley. When he ran out of serving spoons, he used metal spatulas, soup ladles, even a pasta server that he carefully ground down to the right dimensions. Word spread fast, not through official channels, through the gunners themselves. They talked to their buddies on other ships. The crew of the Yorktown visited the crew of the Enterprise during a brief port call at Pearl Harbor. They showed them the modification, demonstrated how it worked. By late June 1942, unofficial Kowalski modifications were appearing on Oerlikons throughout the Pacific Fleet. Nobody called it that. Nobody put it in reports. But gunners knew. They'd make the modification themselves, late at night, using whatever materials they could scrounge. A piece of spoon handle here, a metal shim there. The exact dimensions varied, but the principle was the same. Wedge something in to absorb heat and maintain pressure on the ejection port. The Navy's Bureau of Ordnance was baffled. Jamming rates on the 20mm Oerlikon dropped by 73% between June and August 1942. They couldn't figure out why. They sent technical inspectors to examine the guns. Some inspectors found the modifications and ordered them removed. The gunners would remove them. Wait for the inspectors to leave, then reinstall them. Other inspectors pretended not to notice. One inspector, a young ensign named David Morrison from the Bureau of Ordnance, did notice. He documented the modification in detail, took photographs, wrote a 30-page technical report explaining exactly how and why it worked. He submitted it to his superiors in September 1942, recommending immediate fleet-wide implementation as an official modification. The report was filed and forgotten. The official position of the Bureau of Ordnance was that the Oerlikon didn't have a jamming problem. Therefore, no modification was necessary. But on the ships, the modification spread. Carrier to carrier, battleship to destroyer. By the end of 1942, an estimated 60–70% of all Oerlikon guns in the Pacific Fleet had some version of the heat sink modification installed. All of them unofficial. All of them technically violations of military regulations. Japanese intelligence noticed. Captured documents from late 1942 show confusion about the improved performance of American anti-aircraft fire. One report, translated after the war, noted, enemy 20mm cannon reliability has improved significantly. Previous advantage in low-level attack runs no longer exists. Recommend altitude change or attack vector modification. The Japanese adapted. They started coming in higher, steeper, faster, which made them easier targets for the 40mm and 5-inch guns. The modification that was supposed to fix one problem ended up changing the entire tactical calculus of carrier air defense. Nobody gave Ray credit, not officially. The Navy's official history of the Battle of Midway, published in 1947, makes no mention of the Oerlikon jamming problem. It doesn't mention Ray Kowalski. It doesn't mention the spoon handle modification that spread across the fleet and saved hundreds, possibly thousands of lives. Ray himself never talked about it. After the Yorktown was finally scuttled on June 7th, too badly damaged to save, Ray was transferred to the USS Hornet. He served in the galley for the rest of the war, made Petty Officer 3rd Class in 1943, got his discharge in November 1945. He went home to Hamtramck, worked in his father's restaurant for 2 years, then opened his own place in 1947, a small diner on Conant Street, Kowalski's family restaurant. He never opened it with Tommy Chen. Tommy was buried at sea off Midway, along with 57 other men who died during that 3-day battle. Ray married a girl from the neighborhood, Martha Wisniewski. They had 3 children. He coached Little League, served on the church council, voted in every election, lived a completely unremarkable life for 53 years. He died in 1998, at age 79, of congestive heart failure. The obituary in the Detroit Free Press was 4 sentences long. It mentioned his Navy service, World War II veteran, but nothing else. No mention of innovation, no mention of lives saved. In 2003, a naval historian named Dr. Patricia Thornton was researching anti-aircraft warfare in the Pacific Theater. She found Ensign Morrison's 1942 report filed away in a box in the National Archives. She started tracking down veterans who'd served on carriers during that period. Most were dead, but she found a few who remembered. "Oh yeah," one of them said. "The spoon thing. Kowalski's trick, everybody did it, saved our asses. Dr. Thornton published a paper in 2005 in the Journal of Military History. It was titled Unauthorized Innovation, Field Modifications to the 20mm Oerlikon in World War II. It mentioned Ray by name. It estimated conservatively that the modification had prevented approximately 847 gun jams during critical combat situations and likely saved between 200 and 400 lives. Nobody in Ray's family knew about any of it until Dr. Thornton contacted them. Ray had never mentioned it, not once in 53 years. There's no memorial, no plaque. The restaurant closed in 2002, became a cell phone store, then a vacant lot. The only physical evidence that Ray Kowalski existed is a headstone in Mount Olivet Cemetery in Detroit. It says, Raymond J. Kowalski, 1919–1998, beloved husband and father, U.S. Navy, 1941–1945. It doesn't say anything about the 15 zeros, about the spoon handle, about the cook who broke the rules and changed naval warfare. But on a shelf in the Smithsonian Storage Facility in Maryland, there's a glass case. Inside it is a modified 20mm Oerlikon receiver assembly, recovered from the wreck of the USS Yorktown during a deep-sea expedition in 1998. If you look closely at the ejection port housing, you can still see it, a thin piece of stainless steel wedged in at a 17-degree angle, the remnant of a serving spoon. The museum label reads, Unknown Field Modification, circa 1942. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the real people behind the history we thought we knew, then do something about it. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. These stories disappear if people like you don't care enough to keep them alive. And drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you served, if your family served, if you have a connection to this war. We want to hear from you. Because heroes like Ray Kowalski didn't get their moment in the history books. The least we can do is give them a moment here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. And we'll see you in the next story.